I was one of the folks who was lucky enough to get a ticket to the Shazam preview screening last night. And if there was one word that I could use to describe it, I would say that it's charming. It's exactly the kind of movie, it hits the right tone that you would expect for a movie about a little boy or a teenage boy who turns into an instant adult superhero, and it has a little kid supporting cast. It's a family movie, and you know, it definitely has adventure and action, but it is very cute and fun and engaging, and charming is the word that I would use to describe it. And I'll get more into it, but first a quick plot summary. But I think many of you probably, you know, the whole plot of Shazam is from the trailers really, but I'll just lay it out for you. Billy Batson is a foster kid who, you know, is magically transported to the Rock of Eternity by the wizard Shazam because he needs a champion. Shazam needs a champion, the wizard, to fight the good fight in the non-magical world. And he chooses Billy because he thinks Billy's got the right stuff. And so Billy says the word Shazam and gets turned into giant, you know, Zachary Levi and the superhero Shazam. And then he has to fight Dr. Savannah, who's another kind of, well, Dr. Savannah is basically an evil magic user. And, you know, they clash. Billy's foster family gets caught in the middle. And it's also, you know, a story about Billy finding a family that he doesn't have previously in the plot. And that's basically the whole Shazam storyline. Now, I will say, if you're a comic book reader who's read the New 52 Shazam run that this movie's based on, you pretty much know the entire plot of this movie. I'm not going to tell you what happens in there, how anything ends, but that's basically it. Except Black Adam is in the Shazam comic book, the New 52 comic book. He's not the villain in this movie. They basically replaced him with Dr. Savannah. And that's basically the plot of Shazam. So if you want to know exactly how Shazam plays out before you watch the movie, I mean, you can go online and read spoilers or whatever on the message boards, or you can read that comic book and you'll pretty much know. Now, I will say one of the good things about this movie, what helps this movie is the directing style by David F. Sandberg. It's very interesting, but because Shazam is apparently a movie that was filmed on a lower budget compared to a lot of other movies of this type, but it looks just as good as those. So, you know, David F. Sandberg did a great job making a decent movie, a good movie with a much smaller budget. I mean, it looks just as good, if not better, than like Captain Marvel, you know, the previous superhero movie, which I think was filmed for much more money. Shazam looks just as good as that. And I think it's because David F. Sandberg is a skilled director, you know, having come from horror and other things. I think he knew how to work with what he had. Whereas with some of the other directors, I think, like Captain Marvel, I think those were first-time directors to a movie of that type. And they were basically using like the Marvel, the MCU house style, I'll say. And so while, you know, it was decently directed, there wasn't much stylistic flair with it. Whereas with David F. Sandberg, I felt I could tell that this was a more skilled director who was able to work more with what he had. And Shazam looks, you know, just as good as the bigger budget superhero movies of today. But when you look at how much it cost, you're like, man, this guy really has some skill. The performances were all great. I mean, the big star of the movie, the most memorable person is Zachary Levi as Shazam himself, the adult superhero. He basically does a good job of playing, you know, a little kid in a big man's body, just in terms of his personality and mannerisms. And from what I've heard, I've never met Zachary Levi, but from what I've heard from people who have, he kind of is a big little kid in terms of his personality. So maybe this might not have been a very hard role for him to play. Maybe he was just playing a different version of himself. But, you know, who cares? I mean, the movie's good and he's good in it. All the little kids supporting cast, they do a great job. Jack Dylan Grazer is kind of the most prominent supporting kid character in the movie. And, you know, it's Freddie Freeman. He's very funny. He is, you know, the funny best friend, so to speak, and also foster brother to Billy, Asher Angel. But, you know, Asher Angel, all the little kids do a great job. Some of the little kids you don't really see in the movie that much, but I have a feeling, you know, that their roles will be expanded, some of them or all of them, in Shazam 2. But from what you see of all the foster kids and their foster parents, those characters are all great and those actors are all great. And it's good because they're going to need to be great because Billy and the other foster kids are pretty much, and Zachary Levi are pretty much the anchors of this franchise going forward. So if any of them were off, that might be a problem. But fortunately, none of them are. Now, my favorite part of Shazam, I feel that Shazam has the most emotionally engaging and narratively satisfying third act of any of the DCEU movies I've seen so far. Aquaman's was pretty good. But I felt that Shazam's was, there's a lot of, you know, emotional character beats and story arcs. Some big, some small in this movie for the various characters. And I felt that the ending tied all of those up along with, you know, the big action pieces at the end. Shazam has a lot of like good, fun action scenes in it too throughout the movie. Fun, you know, adventure kind of action scenes, but they're pretty engaging. And, you know, you are very interested in this world and these characters. And when it all culminates in the big third act fight, it is very fun. I was excited. I felt like I was watching like a live action Saturday morning cartoon. And if you're someone who watched a lot of the 80s cartoons, you know, they would have a cast of characters. You know, there'd be like 5 or 6, you know, main characters, and they would have adventures like in every episode. And, you know, this is what that felt like to me. It felt like, you know, Billy and the other foster kids were like the characters in like a live action cartoon. And, you know, they had like a villain to fight. And it was just a big, you know, fun adventure. And I think that's going to work in Shazam's favor. I mean, the style of the movie, I think they were shooting for a more like 80s, like Steven Spielberg kind of vibe with, you know, the tone of the movie and other movies like that were made at that time, like Gremlins and stuff. And I'd say that this movie it's in that vein. So it is very, you know, it's a live action adventure movie, you know, a fun adventure movie with a bunch of little kids in it. And I think that's cool. And it's definitely fitting and appropriate for the character. I think that DC movies, I don't know, there's the debate about whether DC movies should be lighter or darker. And right now it seems like DC's pivoting mostly the lighter tones in their movies. But I think they should take the tone that fits the character in question. And with Shazam, this movie is the right tone for that character. You know, a little boy who turns into a superhero. You don't really want that movie to be dark. And this movie wasn't, but it was definitely right on point. So I definitely recommend Shazam, and it's a good time. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like it on YouTube and subscribe to the channel because I appreciate your viewership, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.